everyone, and welcome to the third episode of Njeri Talks. We are honored to have with us today Ife Osaga-Odondo, the head of legal for Google in the Sub-Saharan African region. I also have Shem with us, Shem Otanga, who is a partner with me at Kieti Advocates, who will co-host with me today.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining us, Ife. Good to see you again after a while.
Thanks for, actually it's an honor to be here. I'm glad to just be with you here today. And I've known both of you for many years, so it's great to not only be here not to only meet socially, but also on when you're doing serious things like this podcast.
Yeah, and it's actually very funny to see you in a serious capacity, Ife, because if anyone knows you, you're the bubbliest, funniest, out there person.
Yeah, I'm also very serious.
But and you have a very serious title to match. So thank you so much, Ife, for joining us, and I'm really, really so happy to have you here. We always start with 3 quick fire questions. I have 4 for you today, and I want to ask you first of all, Ife, how did you get your name? You're a Kenyan girl, correct?
Yes, I'm Kenyan. I'm glad you know that, because most people think I'm Nigerian before they talk to me.
Yeah, because Ife is Nigerian.
Yeah, it's a Nigerian
name. Yeah.
No, it's just that my parents thought that my mother is African American, and she felt that her heritage might be from West Africa, and so all of us have Nigerian names.
Yeah. Did you was it strange for you at school, or how did people were like, what does that mean?
No, actually for a long time nobody really cared about the name until the advent of Nollywood and Nigerian movies. And suddenly everybody said, are you Nigerian? I was like, you've been living with me for 10 years. How have I suddenly become Nigerian? And even I would go to immigration, and when I'd give my Kenyan passport, they say, Madam, where were you Niger?
But Kenyan to the core.
Yeah, Kenyan to the core, born and raised. But as I said, it wasn't an issue until everybody began to watch Nollywood movies.
And so authentically Nigerian, authentically Kenyan as well.
Yeah, you could say that.
Tell us, Ife, how did you come to be a lawyer? What drew you to the law, and why did you choose law in the first place?
So it's interesting. I've always known that I wanted to be a lawyer all my life. And then I remember my dad saying, we don't have any engineers in the family. So I had 2 years of saying that I'd want to be an aeronautical engineer. But in the end, I was like, I just want to be a lawyer. I used to talk too much. And the thing is, I didn't talk for until age 3. My parents were worried. They're like, oh my God, we have to take her to a speech therapist. And then when I talked, I didn't stop talking, But I always knew. And for me, it's not even the issue of, saying lots of things. It's the issue of justice. For me, it's something I feel strongly about, And I felt, as I grew older, and I would see situations of injustice, like, I want to be able to be in a position where I can do something about it.
Okay, cool. Ife, I don't know where to start with your career path. I know that you've been a teacher. Mm-hmm. You've just told us that you owned your own law firm.
Yeah.
You've been working in international organizations all your life. Tell us, if I tell you, what would you say led you to the path of being at Google now? Can you give us a bit of your background history?
Yeah, it's a very unconventional path to Google, to be honest, because I have had one career change. I actually started out as a corporate lawyer in Nairobi. I did that for about a year, then I joined UNHCR. And when I joined UNHCR, I thought to myself, I like doing other things other than law, because whereas I worked in a legal protection department, I got exposed to a lot of other things. And so after 2 years at UNHCR, I was like, I'm going to go do a degree in international development. And so I actually went and did a degree in international development, a master's degree. Mm-hmm. And then after that, I worked as a program manager for Oxfam America in Boston in the US. And I didn't work with lawyers. I mostly worked with sociologists and really it was really not lots of legal work. And it was at that point that I realized that I actually prefer to just be a lawyer, because I found that, at least in law, you had a clear black or white line, because you had law that said A, B, C, D, and that is where you based your behavior based on that very definite thing. And so after I did that, I decided to go back to law school to do my master's.
Yeah.
And that's when I started my second career, really of doing legal work. So I worked at the World Bank. I worked at a research think tank in New York called Innovations for Poverty Action, and then joined Google. But interestingly enough, I feel like all the experiences I had in those different jobs have prepared me to be the sort of lawyer I am. It was never a waste, because one of the things I did was I worked cross regionally. I mean, actually, I worked not only in Africa but Asia and Latin America, and the experiences that I had, working in those regions have been very important to shaping me to be the lawyer that I am and the way that I think. So it wasn't like a linear path that I planned. For me, what I've always done is when opportunities present themselves, I try. It's really just being courageous. And sometimes I think, oh my God, what is this I'm doing? I mean, it's very scary and I'm very nervous. But in life, you just have to try.
I'm so glad you're saying that because as you know, me and Shem have just joined and just become partners.
Yeah.
And it is it's an act of bravery. It's stepping out of yourself really into something courageous. And so I'm glad you're saying that. In terms of the path, I think you've said it correctly. Everything that you do matches up to something in total.
Yeah.
And you're a demonstration of the fact that you can have many versions of a career and not just stick to one path.
Yeah.
What makes you a good lawyer? What do you think distinguishes you as a lawyer?
So I think really it's a core skills. Or for example, I think like one of my strengths is creative thinking and problem solving. Like for me, I not only do I think I'm great at it, I also enjoy it. If I cannot wait to solve or delve into an issue when it's presented to me, and I'm and because of the experiences that I've had and experience, you really can't replace experience. I've seen lots of things and I've seen how lots of things work. So I always have an idea about how things might go, and it guides me in my decision making.
Yeah.
So I think that's one of my things. The other thing that has been also great for me is relationship building. I think relationships are key, relationships are key in the sense that I think that I can get more out of my outside counsel if we have a good relationship.
Yeah.
Right. Because outside counsel will be able to pick up my call at 11 when I have a crisis and will go out of their way to do something extra for me. So I think that another key thing that has, made me a good lawyer is really my relationships, and not only with lawyers, but all across the board. Even like in my day-to-day work, a relationship with the business. If the business trusts you, then they will actually involve you very early on, and you're able to provide the right advice at the right time and make sure everything is a success. So just some of those are the
even
factors,
sitting with you now, you have a real zest for life. I think that that's an excellent answer for that question. I know that you're passionate about it. You've also been a teacher before.
Yeah.
You taught at Tufts.
Yes, and at Boston University.
Yeah.
I actually studied at McKinney College many years ago. I taught the law class.
Let's keep it. So you started in Kenya, then taught in America as well.
Yes.
If I tell you teaching, if I finish the sentence for me, teaching has taught me.
That you're never too young to learn, you know what I mean, to learn something new. So one thing I like about teaching is that I'm always impressed by the curiosity of students, and their hope and their, ability to have no restrictions in the way they think. Because as we grow older, sometimes we become jaded and we think, oh my God, we can't do this. And then you come across this young student who has no idea of what the future holds or has not come across this situation before, and they are like, no, we can try. Let's try something different. So I find that teaching keeps you young, it keeps you learning, and I'm inspired. You'd think that, when you're teaching that you are inspiring or imparting knowledge, but I have found that even when I taught, I learned a lot from my students because they had a fresh view, more curious, less jaded, and I learned and I grew.
So you're not teaching anymore?
Well, I haven't for a while.
Right.
And you know what it is? I think it's where I am in my life, because I'm at the point where I feel that I want to focus a bit on ensuring that my kids are stable. They're, I have teenagers and all.
Right.
And so I think that's where I want to put a huge amount of my effort on the family. And so between the job and the family, it limits what else I can do. So, at some point I will go back to do it. I always say to my youngest, she's 8 years old, that when she goes to college, I'm also going to do my PhD.
We want to talk a bit about career highs and lows.
Right.
What has been your highest high and your lowest low?
So I think that my highest high was actually joining Google, and I'll tell you why. Because I'm a corporate lawyer. That is my DNA as a lawyer, And corporate lawyers are usually generalists because what you do is you work in house and you work on different issues. You don't really specialize on anything. And I always thought that to join Google you need to be like a specialist tech lawyer, But
that's the impression most people have.
Yeah. But I mean, Google has all sorts of lawyers. We do have those lawyers who specialize, in copyright and trademark trademarks and that kind of stuff. But then you also have room for corporate lawyers who just ensure that the entities are doing well, and just manage the general legal health of the organization. So for me, I always thought that, I need to, spend hours coding and stuff like that, and so I applied for the job, and I was like, I'd actually applied severally, by the way. And so when I applied for the job, I was like, okay, I'm going to try.
What do you mean by severally? As in you'd applied many times?
Yes, I actually had applied.
It wasn't the first time
I applied, yeah. And then I remember even there was a time I applied and they said, oh, actually we're looking for a lawyer who was a tech background. I think what I needed was just the right job and the right fit. So it doesn't mean I don't do technology law. It's one of the many things I do, but I actually spend a lot of time doing technology law than I did before. And it's something that I hadn't done. I hadn't done much of that before I joined Google. I was general counsel of a research think tank, so I did intellectual property law and of course corporate law, but I really didn't spend time working a technology bit. So when I had the opportunity to join Google, it was great because it showed me that you can always pivot your career, if
how you want.
But I have to tell you, I really prepared for this interview. I read, I talked to tech lawyers. I understood.
Tell us, what was it? Was it a phone call? Was it an email? How did they tell you? Break it to you? I mean that must have been the email of your life.
It was like 6 or 7 interviews, guys.
Okay.
It took so long. In fact, at the time, I started interviewing because my job at the time had sent me to Nairobi on a field assignment to roll out a compliance program all across the offices in Africa. So I was in Nairobi for a while. And so when the job came up, I applied when I was in Nairobi. I interviewed, like so many interviews. And then I didn't hear from them. So I packed up my things and I moved back to the US where I was based,
Okay.
And a week after I moving back, I actually get a message from Google to say, okay, you've got the job.
So they called you?
Yes, they called me.
Yeah.
The recruiter called me. And I thought to myself, wow, a week after I have left Nairobi. So then I had to pack my things again and move back to Nairobi.
But that couldn't have been, the highlight was the call.
Yes, it was, and even the interview process was quite tough. And I have a close friend. I remember when I was interviewing, she told me, Ife, just prepare like you would for an exam, or and that's what I said. Many people, and I've sat at job interviews, they just show up for the job interview, but really you have to prepare. And the thing about being a lawyer is that you don't have to know everything. You can't know everything. You must be willing to put in the work to learn. So even though I hadn't spent some time doing much time doing technology law, I spent time learning about the things which are important for the company, and understanding the legal issues, that would be important for Google at the time. And so I was able to talk about them and articulate. I talked to several people, just to get some experience for people who actually do this on a regular basis. Yeah. So as I said, the thing is, as a lawyer, you must learn.
Completely understood on that. And actually, I think even as a corporate lawyer, I understand every transaction you do is a different industry.
Yes.
But you have to be able to understand exactly what they do. The lowest low?
So the lowest low, I remember that was in 2008. I had just sat for the New York bar. I had finished my degree at Columbia Law. I just had given birth to my son, and I thought that I was in a great space. I've passed the New York bar. I have my degree, and I'm all set. And I remember I had a job offer from a big law firm in New York, which I turned down at the time because I thought, I was worried about whether I'd be able to do it because it would require long hours. So I was like, let me look for something that's not as intense because I had a newborn baby. And then the financial crash of 2008 happened, and I sent out over 300 job applications, and I couldn't get a job.
300?
Yes, I couldn't get a job. Jeez. I couldn't get a job for over 8 months. And for me, just the timing of it was really at a time when I thought I was, I had done everything I needed to do to jumpstart my legal career, and now I can't find a job for 8 months. It was a really tough time, and it made me really think, my God, am I going to be able to go back into law again? But in retrospect, it was good for my family. I spent a lot of time with my son. And I don't know if he remembers, but I was there for the first 8 months of his life the time.
That's so funny. But I think things happen for a reason, and you just have to. You can look back in hindsight and understand that. Ife, what would people be surprised to know about you? I mean, we've discovered so much already, but what would people be surprised to know? You're not going to tell us that you're shy and retiring at home.
No, definitely not. What I'm going to tell you though is that I used to be a competitive swimmer.
Seriously?
People get shocked because I mean, over the years, I've gained quite a bit of weight.
Ife, please, let's not do that.
No. And believe it or not, I in my youth I was quite sporty. Like I was a competitive swimmer, and I'm the type that would run, long distance races. So I'm not fast, but I have endurance. Like I'm the type, when I was active, I could do, kilometers and kilometers. I'm the type of person who, if I was young and I was in good shape, like I was in my youth, I probably would have done the Comrades Marathon, the 98 km in.
Wow.
That's it. Yeah, that's it.
What was your stroke?
Believe it or not, butterfly.
Butterfly. Yeah. I also swam butterfly actually.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and actually my race was the 4x50 individual medley, which is like the longest race.
Wow.
I'm for me it's endurance. I'm long distance, consistent over long distance. I'm not a sprinter. Yeah, but I was quite sporty. I mean, you can't believe it because but I will change this. There's always time.
There's always time. People who do endurance runs, it's about mental strength. It's not actually about the power that you have. Yes. So that goes to show something about you as well.
Yeah.
So
I hadn't thought about it that way.
Yeah, because it takes a lot of stamina mentally to keep you going. This quick fire round has turned into more than just a quick fire round, but thank you so much. So, Ife, I want to get into, life at work. I mean, you work for one of the most powerful companies in the entire world. What is your day-to-day life like?
So days are not the same, okay? Sometimes I have really long days where I'll have meetings from, 8, 9, 10 and end at around 8, 9, 10 in the evening. Yeah. It depends because I cover Africa, that is my core job, but then the teams that I support sit in Europe and America, and actually mostly in California, which is 11 hours behind Kenya. So at 7 p.m. California is waking up. So usually some days my day really gets busy at 7 p.m. because then I have meetings with several teams. Wow. So as a corporate lawyer, and I really cover really all the legal issues that Google's dealing with in Africa land on my desk. So it's a mix of litigation, a mix of product counseling, corporate law, figuring out how our entities are doing, if they're complying, with the relevant rules and regulations, working with our government relations team to review laws that have come out to see what impact they have on the business. But I think a big chunk of my work is actually working on product counseling, which is really ensuring that Google products comply with laws wherever we are. Right. Like if we roll out, Gmail in Kenya, we have to make sure that, it complies with the relevant law, Data Protection Act, consumer law and stuff like that. So my job is to, advise the product teams and actually product counsel, who are actually lawyers who work directly with the engineers and the product business teams to roll out these products in other parts of the world. So I give them the regional perspective.
And your input comes in from the inception stage, really. I know Google is very big on compliance, as you say. I mean, as part of product development, they need a legal mind. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yes, you're right. Sorry. So it doesn't necessarily come from me because we have product counsel who are lawyers who work with the product. Right. But there's always a lawyer in the journey. Right. Yeah. And I come in at the point where you are trying to figure out is the product, can we roll out this product in Africa? So that's when I come in to provide advice on that. Right. Legal advice. Yeah.
I mean, sounds intense. I mean, I guess the stereotype, the general idea out there is that practice outside in a law firm would be very, very intense, but then if you want a lighter role, in-house would be the thing for it. And from what you're saying, it sounds like it's equally intense. I mean, you've done both. You've practiced as a lawyer in a law firm of your own, and you're in-house. Would you confirm that stereotype?
Yes, I have. And you it's busy with wherever you are.
Anywhere you look at it.
So as I said, I think that as I said, I have really busy days. The days where I put in lots of hours and even will work over the weekends if there's crisis. and then there are days when it's pretty light, and I have time. I can leave work early and do other things. So it can be busy. But I kind of think, however, that in-house you have a little bit more control over your hours, and over the amount of over the way you work, as opposed to working as outside counsel. Because even though you have internal clients, that you're working with, usually you are working towards the same thing. You have the same ethos, and so you understand how each of you works, as opposed to outside counsel, where you are actually having to respond to your clients' needs. And remember, you have different clients who have different needs, right, and who operate differently, and so trying to manage that can be challenging. So I think that's the difference, in that I think you have a little bit more control, because you know your client more, and you have a tighter working relationship with your client, as opposed to outside counsel.
And let me ask you a technical question, but when you look at rolling out a product throughout Africa, what are the first questions that you ask? Do you have a set of questions that you know already? This is what I need to flag. Do you have it at your fingertips? Is it something that you need to research now, or does it come naturally?
After a number of years, it comes naturally. Because so usually when people want to run a product, I try to understand, how does this product work? Okay, and then once I understand how the product works, then I think, okay, if this is where the product works, we have to worry about, if we're collecting information, how does this apply when it comes to Data Protection Act? If we are dealing with the general public and consumers, how does this apply when it comes to consumer law? If you're dealing with media, how does this, how does this interact with the Films and Publications Act? How does it affect, so really it's understanding the product, and then of course I have a general idea of the legal landscape. Actually, not a general idea, I have a pretty good idea of the legal landscape. And so right away I have a sense of what laws would apply. But then depending on how technical it is, sometimes then I'll send it out to a specialist outside counsel. Because I spend my time doing lots of things. I don't focus on only one, only one thing. So I might miss something which an outside counsel who spends 10 hours doing the same thing,
will know back to back.
Like for example, it's a tax law issue. I know the basics of tax law, but I generally I would usually send my work to a tax lawyer who spends half of their life, reading the tax code, as opposed to me, who spends just a few hours reading it.
I think the example that I have is when we're doing cross-border transactions, and we know that, for example, in Rwanda they don't have a competition law, so that's already not an issue. Whereas in other jurisdictions, they definitely have specific laws, and labor laws are different in each country. So it's about knowing the entire framework, isn't it? It's a lot of work, isn't it, Ife?
It is. But as I said, if it's something that you do every day, it becomes natural. Like for me, sometimes somebody tells me, oh, we want to do this, and I'm right away, I'm like, okay, you have to think about A, B, C, D, E. But that's why I say, I find that lawyers become more valuable the older you are and the more experienced you are, because then you see things, and you learn from those things, and you learn from those experiences. And I always say that, the more experience you have, the more valuable you become. And I think experience is key.
Experience is so key
in lawyering.
It's so key. But there's one thing that has changed over the time that I've practiced, in the short 10-year period that I've practiced, which is having qualified in London, communication between lawyers or even between clients was always very formal.
Yes.
And now with the younger lawyers coming in, they actually showed me you can text a client, you can WhatsApp a client, you can send them a message and just get the information out there quickly, which I thought was always a faux pas. It was a no-no.
I have to tell you, I actually recently, maybe 2-3 years ago, had somebody in Nigeria serve me on WhatsApp. And I was like, what? Are you sending me legal documents on WhatsApp? First of all, I was like, I wish I had never given you my phone number. But it turns out that when I actually, so I actually questioned this, and I challenged. I was like, why are you sending
service?
Yes, but it turned out that actually, in that instance, they could serve us on WhatsApp, and I think recently. Maybe you guys know that recently, even here in Kenya, I think you really can serve people by email. I don't know about what is that.
You can.
On email. I don't know if you can do this on WhatsApp, but I know that I had this instance in Nigeria where I was served on WhatsApp, and so now I was saying, now I have to worry about who I give my phone number.
Number two. That's interesting. So there are changes that experience can't give you, but experience is definitely key. I want to know, over the time that you've practiced, what has changed for you in in terms of how you carry out your practice. Are you more patient with yourself? Are you more trusting with yourself? Are your instincts better, sharper? What do you think?
Yeah, I think definitely my instincts are better and sharper, and I see this with my team. I have a team who are a bit have less experience, younger than me, and they'll ask me questions, and I think to myself, this is easy, and it's not easy because it's easy. It's easy because I've seen this before, and I've seen how it can pan out. So I think that's that's a key thing. The other thing I've learned, I don't know, it probably is the same all across the professions, that I've had to be very, very resilient and willing to learn new things, because when I think about the products that I worked on 5 years ago, it's very different 5 years later. And when you work for a technology company, technology changes every day, and new issues are presented every day, and so you have to stay on top of things. You have to learn, you have to read, you have to understand how things work. Like now, you like, for example, I'm compared to my friends, I'm more savvy in social media. I'm more careful because I'm a lawyer, because I'm careful about what I say, because I don't want it to be used against me in evidence. But I'm pretty versatile, and my friends like, Ife, you're always on all these platforms. I'm like, I'm comfortable with them, but it's because of the environment in which I work. I have no choice but to remain engaged. Well, I also have teenagers, so I must remain engaged so that I know what they're doing.
I want to talk a bit about being a working mother. You've mentioned your teenagers. How do you make it work? I mean, can you have it all?
This is something that I've just come to make my peace with recently, because we all grow up thinking you can have the perfect job and have the perfect family and be the perfect wife and perfect mother. No, it's unfortunately, I used to think that it was mostly a thing in the West, because in Africa, you in many parts of Africa, I know that because I'm in Africa, and in Kenya, and just generally across the continent, it's very, labor is cheap, so you can actually find, somebody to take care of your child. You can find a babysitter, you can find a housekeeper, you can find a nanny at an affordable rate. This is a different story, like in the US. It's a whole different story in the US and Europe and North America and those places. And so basically the job of taking care of your kids is almost 100% on the parents, as opposed to here in Africa, where we have a more communal setup where you can have grandmothers, aunties, and then you can also hire somebody to help you take care of the kids. So when I spent a huge, chunk of my career in the US, and I struggled. It was tough, to raise,
because you had your children young and in the US.
Yes, in the US, I had all of them in the US, and so my husband and I, we changed all the diapers of our kids. Nobody can say that they have changed our kids' diapers. It's just me and my hubby and nobody else. So it was really hard there, and so when I moved to Kenya 5 years ago, I thought, now I can hire, a housekeeper, nanny, which I did quite a number. I had a full staff, to compensate for the years of having them. And I thought, now I can have it all. But no, it's still, you still will sacrifice something, if in either direction, either at work or at or as a mother. I'll give you an example. I used to attend annual meeting every summer around July in London.
A Google meeting.
And this is the same time, around the same time, because it's the same time every year, is about when my daughter has her birthday. So I remember one year, I said, a year ago, I wrote her a message, said, hey, happy birthday, Lina. I'll be home soon and we'll celebrate it. She says, yeah, mommy, thank you, mommy. I hope that one day you'll be home for my birthday. I cried. I'm a big grown woman, but I cried because I just felt like I failed her. And I have a heavy, before COVID, I used to have quite a heavy travel schedule. And to be honest, every day I left and went to the airport, I felt guilty because it meant I missed certain moments in my children's life. But I need to make those trips to be able to be a good lawyer, to meet my clients' needs and to do a good job. But then in the same way, it meant that I wasn't there for some things. And so I continually lived a life of guilt. Once you recognize that it's not perfect, then you decide where you want to make the trade-offs, and then you move ahead, because life's not perfect anyway.
So we also have mutual friends in common, and I know you have a very good set of girlfriends. How are they your sounding board? Are they the people that you tend to? Are they the people you party with?
Yes.
Do you party?
Yes, of course. Life is short. So I actually have lots of friends, and I keep good relationships. Interesting enough, I'm the person who maintains relationships really through meetups. So I actually make time to meet up with my friends. I'm not great on text, okay?
Yeah.
And on the converse, my husband's great on text. So whenever we have common friends, usually he's in charge of texting the friends and responding to the text, because I'm not great on text. But I find that I'm better with phone calls and meetups. And when I traveled a lot, I was able to actually maintain my friendships across, the US and different places where I had friends. Because every time I go, I would actually reach out to
and
people,
make a point to
meet up with them. I'm big on making time to meet with people, and so usually I have friends who I won't see in 3-4 years. And then we will meet, and it will be like we were never apart, Yeah, but I also think social media makes things, in a way, it makes things easier because you know what people are doing. In a way, it's also a difficult thing because then you don't check on them because you know how they're doing.
Yeah.
So that's the disadvantage. But I make efforts to, whenever I can, have in-person meetings as opposed to, I'm not the texting type.
Fantastic. I think we can talk a little bit about tech and law. Njeri.
Let's go ahead.
I just had a few questions here. I mean, the world is changing dramatically. I think 2020 was the most dramatic year, but the changes had begun well before that. We're beginning to see a lot more of technology is filtering into a number of industries and sectors. We're seeing government moving more towards provision of services through electronic means. You have your e-citizen, you have your NTSA applications for driver's licenses happening online. When I did my driver's test, I had to actually go fill out a form and apply, but now that's not the case at all. So the technology is really transforming industries, sectors, government service delivery, and all that. How do you see technology affecting legal practice going forward? We've seen meetings, I think the obvious thing is that meetings have moved online for everyone and stuff like that. Do you see the lawyer's role becoming more diminished and people relying more on technology? And how can we as lawyers position ourselves for this change?
I have to say, lawyers are very, very conservative, and I think it has taken a big event like COVID for lawyers to realize that actually you need to keep up with the times. I think that
very true.
I think that most other professions have been more receptive of the changes in technology, but in lawyers we still want to present paper documents. We want to have ink signatures, and that, we don't want electronic signatures. I think lawyers have been very, very slow to take up technology and to embrace it. But the reality really, as you have said, is that if you don't embrace it, then you're going to fall off the wayside. I think we have no choice but to embrace it, even in the ways that we do it, because of technology, it means that certain things can be done more efficiently. And for example, I was reading a few years ago about how and this is a few years ago, of where there was software already a few years ago, where that software that could review documents.
Right.
Like very basic, common documents. That you wouldn't need a lawyer to look at those documents. And so I remember attending a meeting where the question was like, oh my God, if there's software doing this, is there any room for lawyers? There is room for lawyers. It means we have to change the ways the ways in which we work. We have to change the points at which we provide value. So maybe we are not going to be reviewing documents, okay? But we have a greater role in negotiation. We have a grerer role in crafting new deals, which embrace technology. Think about something like blockchain. It's new. What I mean? How those are new types of contracts. So we have to find ways to work with new types of contracts, understand the new concepts and stuff like that. So the truth of the matter is that there's really is things cannot be business as usual. We must change. We must find ways to find value. There is room for lawyers, because in the end, technology is really managing in when it comes to legal work, is really managing rights and liabilities and responsibilities between human beings. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? And human beings are unpredictable. They still remain unpredictable, and therefore, technology can't solve all the problems. There's still room for us to add value.
Yeah.
You know, where we can be able to help negotiate, navigate, disputes and that kind of stuff. That technology wouldn't be able to do. So I think that will be okay. I think we will have jobs for a long time, but I just think that they will not be the jobs that we had, before, and we will not necessarily work in the same way. Who would have thought that now you'd have been presenting before the court through,
Digital
a platform like Meet or I think Teams or whatever platform you're using.
Yeah.
Who would have known that you'd be speaking to the judge that way? That's new. The truth of it is it's happened like that in a lot of jurisdictions. It's been slower to pick up in Kenya, but now we have no choice but to do it. Yeah.
But I think actually, out of the African jurisdictions, Kenya is doing very well in that space. Our infrastructure is there to enable us to do it. Yeah. So I think we're winning that battle slowly. But I think for lawyers, it's about knowing where to plug in, as you've as you've correctly stated, where we can really add value in a changing world. What is your what kind of relationship do you want to have with your outside counsel? What are the values that you see significantly that they can add to your work?
Okay.
Load.
So increasingly, as in-house counsel, I have to be a business partner. Right.
Yeah.
I can't be. Gone are the days where the lawyer is a gatekeeper, where your job is to say yes, no, yes, no.
Yeah.
It doesn't work like that anyway. What my clients want, my internal clients want me to do is to tell them, how do we do this product or how do we do this project in a way that is legal and complies with the relevant rules and regulations?
Yeah.
Okay. And does not expose us to any enforcement action from whoever, regulators or whoever, who would be exposed to. So it means that you're a business partner. You have to work with them and be creative in the way you think about things. So for me, I want outside counsel who are helping me in my role as the business partner to the client, okay? And I want outside counsel who are able to think outside the box, who are actually they're solution oriented, they problem solvers, and they provide solutions.
Yeah.
I don't want lawyers who say to me, no, you can't do this, and then the story finished.
Right.
I want you to tell me, no, you can't do this, but you can. I can see you're trying to achieve X.
Right.
You can actually achieve X through a different way, okay? And so your project can move
Yeah.
ahead.
So you have to come from a place of yes. It's possible.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you have to come from a place of trying to find a solution. It's not a place of being a gatekeeper. For a long time, lawyers have been gatekeepers.
Right.
And for me, I think that I want outside counsel to help me find solutions, help me to, help my business operate in a legal way.
Right. And it's an increasingly more regulated environment, the technology space. As things move on towards being more digital and relying more on technology and all that, a number of risks begin to arise. Cybersecurity becomes a very big concern. People are more aware about their rights to privacy and things of that nature, and we're beginning to see law evolve to catch up and regulate those spaces. And those are, I imagine, quite significant areas for your business and the company that you work for, Google. So what's your approach towards these areas? Because you're a very innovative company. Is it a more risk-averse approach, or are you likely to sort of push the boundaries a bit more? Tell us a little bit about that.
So I wouldn't say that you have a one-fits-all approach to doing work. It's always going to depend on the circumstances. I always see people really hate it when you ask a lawyer a question, they say it depends. I say reality depends. It depends on the set of facts that is presented before you.
Yeah.
It depends on the circumstances, really.
Yeah.
And no circumstances are going to be the same. I think, so I wouldn't tell you that there's a particular approach that we use. It's going to depend on what set of facts is before me. What I can say, though, is that technology moves very fast. It changes very fast.
Right.
And I think that therefore it presents a challenge for lawmakers, okay, and people who rule out rules and regulations.
Yeah.
Because the reality is that a lot of the time, when the laws are passed, they will be relevant but for a very short time,
Yeah.
because technology is going to change.
Yeah.
And then in several instances, you're going to find situations where you have a product you want to roll out, and there's just absolutely no law that applies to it,
Yeah, yeah.
in place, or the laws that they are trying to apply to this product are so archaic. Like for a long time, I remember until we in the last few years we've had lots of laws passed in Kenya within the technology space. This is very recent, the last 4 or 5 years.
Yeah.
I remember I've had instances where people are trying to to apply the penal code to a technology issue, and
Yeah.
I'm like, I mean, really, how is this not going to work?
Yeah.
They're two different things.
Yeah.
So that remains a challenge for the lawmakers and the regulators, because they have to ensure that their laws are flexible enough to absorb new change and growth.
So do you do lobbying as well?
Yes. So
do you work with lawmakers in order for that to happen?
So we have a government relations team
Yeah.
that works very closely with lawmakers, and so whenever we have new rules being proposed, we will engage through
Yeah.
different industry organizations.
Yeah.
We've quite a number, like I think
KEPSA, yeah.
and a few others.
Right.
And also maybe sometimes they regulate with the regulator directly, just to give them our views on how we think this would work and stuff like that. What I have seen that is very, very innovative, I think I saw this in Mauritius, and I've seen it in a few other jurisdictions where they have this sandbox license.
Yes. Right.
Where I think which is a great idea, where they say, okay, we don't quite know how this is going to pan out,
Right.
but we'll let you try it out, and then we'll figure it out.
Yeah, so the Capital Markets Authority currently has a sandbox for fintech.
Oh,
and so
for
they've been rolling it out from like 2018.
Oh, that's excellent.
Just so
Yeah,
that people
yeah.
can play in it,
Yeah,
figure
yes.
it out, and then
Yeah. So I think those are very innovative ways to deal with this problem of changing technology, and I think it's a thing for also the in the end. It needs a concerted effort, both
Yeah.
from the industry and the government, to ensure that we have rules and regulations that are relevant and that are actually respond to the market.
Yeah.
In the end, you also don't want a renegade market. You want to have clear procedures and processes, because you have to protect the consumer. So there should be laws, but
Yeah.
we have to make sure that they are laws that make sense.
Google being a multinational company with presence all over the world, Europe, and jurisdictions particularly like Europe, where data protection regulation is quite advanced, and Google is based in Ireland, a jurisdiction that has a very strong data protection commission. We're just moving into a space in Kenya and much of Sub-Saharan Africa that you cover, where data protection laws are now being put into place slowly by slowly. In 2020, we saw a lot of stuff coming into place in Kenya. The Data Protection Commissioner appointed in South Africa. We saw POPI coming into force, all in 2020. I just want to get your insight on this. What do you think companies in Sub-Saharan Africa who are not so used to data protection regulation, what do you think are the practical steps that companies in this space can do to ensure that they are more compliant and that they catch up, based on your insight from other jurisdictions and Google's familiarity with such sort of regulations?
Yeah. So I think first of all, as a company, you must understand how your company works and understand your company's product.
Right.
And then understand the law. Take time to actually understand the Data Protection Act, what it says and how it applies to your company's product, and how it applies to how your company works.
Right.
Once you have a clear understanding of that, and then of course you work on compliance. Now, if you have instances where you're not clear where you should comply, at that point you should engage with the regulator. I think gone are the days where we let the regulator do their own thing, and the industry did their own thing. I think that really it's a partnership. It's not an antagonistic relationship. It's a partnership to work together to ensure you have the right ecosystem, the right regulatory regime to ensure success of everybody. The consumer is protected, and you as a company are able to grow, in an environment that is enabling. So, I really think it's understanding your product, understanding the law, and ensuring that you have engagement as needed.
Right. I mean,
of course, complying.
Right. I mean, those are very practical steps. I mean, regulator engagement is a key aspect.
Yeah.
I think for any player or any stakeholder.
Yeah.
And I mean, data protection now cuts across every sector. You know what I mean? So I was going to say, depending on the sector you're in, but really this is a cross-cutting law. So what sort of compliance challenges do you think companies in Sub-Saharan Africa will face in respect to such a law? Some people say the right to privacy and data protection and personal data is not a very African concept. It's more of a European concept and all that. Do you think that's a valid argument or valid proposition? And what challenges do you specifically see guys facing?
So I think that I think law evolves differently in different parts of the world, and I think culture is a thing, or is a key thing. And I think the reality is that we won't know until we try. You know what I mean? Okay.
I agree with that.
Yeah. So I don't want to try and be the prophetess to say what I think the issues are. You know, but
you don't have a crystal ball somewhere.
I don't have a crystal ball to say what will what will show up in the future. But I think that what we have found that in the end, what regulators have done in I find in a lot of parts of Africa is actually really copy the laws that they see in other parts of the world.
Right.
Okay. And in some instances it works, in some instances it doesn't. You know what I mean?
Right.
But and I always say I don't want to be too hard on the regulators, because you have to start somewhere. Okay?
Right.
What I say is that I think we need to ensure that we are flexible enough to make changes where changes need to be made. Yeah, I think and for us to be able to say, okay, you have said that this is how this works here. We've tried this for 2 years. This is the way it's shown up in this ecosystem or in this environment. These are the changes we need to make. So I think that what we need a bit of flexibility on both sides, on the industry side and the regulatory side, to see how it works. But the truth of it is that we have to start somewhere, and we have to expect that there'll be a few issues. You know what I mean? Because you're right, the concept of privacy is very, very different. I think about how when I go to the bank, someone is on my back touching me. I have to tell my face, please give me some space. You know? And then I've been to other parts of the world in the US where everyone's keeping you a foot away from me, and you wonder, oh my God, is there something wrong with me? You know, and that's just a culture. You know, so privacy is a big deal there. Whereas here in Kenya, I see how people very, very easily give their private information. At the security stand, you give your name, your ID number, your telephone number. Very freely, even about to put your mother's name, your father's name, and you don't think twice about it. And this, and that's the culture we have. In other parts of the world, you try to ask that, people say why?
Why do I need to?
So you're right. Culture is a thing, and the truth of it is that we have to just start, see how it affects, and then make the changes. I also think the truth of the matter is that as the years go by, as the world becomes global, and we will change accordingly. The reason why privacy is treated differently is because people have had different experiences with how their personal information
exactly
is used. And as the world becomes global, you find that things become the same. Things become similar, and therefore people begin to build norms that react to whatever they experience. So it's possible that maybe 10 years from now, people will be in Kenya, people will be asking why am I giving you?
I actually really like people build norms around what they've experienced, and I think that's a very it's a succinct way of talking about data protection, because the issue came about when people's information started being sold, correct? And that's where the issue. That's not an issue that people maybe have experienced in Africa necessarily to know that it's an issue for them now. But it will become an issue as we normalize things. That's a very good point.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with you. I think it's also kind of reflected in the sort of penalties that are there outside Africa. Even, I mean, as you said, we did borrow quite a bit from foreign laws, but one area that we did not borrow or copy directly was the penalties, right? And I think that was a reflection of the sort of premium people put on their privacy rights in Europe as opposed to here in Kenya. The penalties are not that high at all. So let's move on to what you see for the future. We're in 2021. It's a new year. We're hoping to get past the pandemic. No one knows. No one has a crystal ball. But we need to prepare.
I'm working with Muremi's April 2021 theory.
Yeah, he thinks by April 2021,
What do you think, Ife?
So I have to tell you, this is the first year I've made no resolutions, because 2020, nothing happened according to plan. So I said this year, I want to take in Kenya you say wasi approach, wait and see. I want to wait and see. I to be honest, I think for me the key word for this year really, and the key thing is to be resilient, to be ready for whatever happens, and be ready to respond and change and adapt.
Right.
That's what it is, being ready to adapt. That's the only way you will survive such times. So and to accept that things change, and when things change, we have to adapt. I don't know if there's going to be a day when I don't know when the end date for COVID is. Who knows? But life must continue, and so we must change and learn and do things differently, and adapt, but still be able to live life.
Yeah.
So you mentioned resilience, I guess, that as your key word for 2021 going forward. Is that let's expect the worst out of this and prepare for that, or is that a very negative approach? Is there any room for hope or optimism this year?
Resilience means hope for the best, but prepare for the worst.
I think that's a beautiful way to put it. Then.
Yeah. I think resilience means that whatever happens, be prepared for it, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's a perfect way to end this podcast. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Ife, and for giving us so many gems, so many pearls of wisdom, and for making the time for us in this crazy, crazy world that we live in. Thank you so much, Ife. This has been great.
Really appreciate you coming over.
Thanks for having me. It was such a great conversation.
Thank you. Yeah. So see you next month, and find us on @Njeri Talks on Instagram, @TIT Advocates on the website, and if you want to email us, njeritalks@gmail.com.